Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to East Central Missouri and the world, and welcome to the James Strong Show podcast, podcast number 243. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for making us a part of your day. I appreciate it. This podcast was recorded on the morning of Saturday, November the 13th, from the James Strong Studio in Western St. Charles County and from Central Arkansas via the long lines. We have a special guest today, Mr. Jerome Koenigsfeld. Jerome, good morning.
Good morning, James. How you doing?
Outstanding, sir. And you?
Doing fine.
Good, good. Hey, you've been on the podcast before, and as a younger man, after serving in the military, you toured the world, and you've given us adventures of your trips through Europe, through Iraq, Afghanistan. We talked about your adventures in India with Goatee, the beggar boy. And
yeah, that was Nepal.
Nepal, thank you. Okay. And you and I were talking, and you mentioned something about the Headhunters of Borneo. And I thought, what? and so, yeah, I met those guys. I went to their village. I did that. I thought, okay, this is the topic for a podcast, most definitely. So we're going to talk about that, the Headhunters of Borneo. And this is not something out of a cartoon. This is not something that was made up. These guys were the real deal, right?
Yes, sir. They were.
They were, and they're still alive today, and you can visit them today, I found out. Before we do that, I did want to touch on one other thing that I found very interesting, because Jerome, you're a very modest individual, but you have lived, your life so far is about 10 times as exciting as the average person, and you continue to stretch the envelope too. We tried to get together earlier, but you said, yeah, I'm going to be out of town. I'm going to be traveling. So, this was not your normal trip that you were going to take. You were going to partake in a medical tourism escapade. Tell me about that, please.
Well, in May, my brother was going to go to Mexico and have his teeth done.
And where does your brother? And where does your brother live?
He lives in Sun City, Arizona.
Okay.
And so that's a lot closer for him than it is for me. But anyway, he was going to go have his teeth done, and I needed a implant in my front tooth. And the dentist here that I go to, she said she can't do it because it's a front tooth, and it would cost starting at $5,500 and go from there. And I also needed a cap. So I said, well, I'll just come out there and meet you in Sun City, and then I'll go with you and have my teeth done. So we went out there in May 1st or 2nd, and had our work done. And then we had to go back here in, was it November 1st, I guess it was, and get the finished, because they have to put the implant in. They screw it in. They had to get a cadaver bone because my gum there at that point was weak. Mm-hmm. And they put a cadaver bone in and then screw the implant in. And then you have to wait 6 months and come back and have the tooth installed on it.
Well, now medical tourism is a big deal. And I've always wondered, okay, yeah, it's a whole lot cheaper because it's Mexico, but you get the same level of care because it's Mexico. What was your experience with a dentist in Mexico versus a dentist in the U.S.?
Well, she was definitely rougher. That's for sure.
By rougher, you don't mean rougher looking. You mean rougher the way she treated you.
Yeah, the way they grind on your teeth and stuff and things like that. But I mean, it all worked out. She supposedly got her license from America, from the United States, but she works in Mexico, but she lives in Yuma, Arizona. Mm-hmm. But I didn't think she spoke that good English, and got confused on medication one time. So that wasn't good. But the majority of the people go down there for their teeth, their eyeglasses, and for medicine. You have hundreds of people crossing that border just to get their medicine, like in line going back out There was one guy from Portland, Oregon, had come down to get his medicine. I mean, they come from all over.
And it's not a different type of medicine. It's the exact same stuff, right?
Yeah, it's all in Spanish, but it's still the same thing. Just the way they package it and stuff is a little different.
Mm-hmm.
But to give you an idea, like when we went the first time in May, one of the fellows there that lives in Arizona near my brother, he takes them inhalers.
Yeah.
And they're like 300 or 350 in the United States. And down there, he was buying them for $50, but we found another drugstore just as good, clean, everything, and they were $35. That's the difference in the price of things.
Yeah, that's just, to me, that's just unbelievable. And that's one of the big deals. That's one of the reasons why medicine, everything in this country costs more, because most countries with socialized medicine, or where the government is involved, they negotiate with the pharmaceutical companies. They say, look, if you want to sell your product in this country, you're only going to charge us so much. And they say, fine. But because they charge the people in Mexico $35, they got to times it by 10 to charge us so they can make their money. So we need to get on the bandwagon and start doing like other countries. Or just do as a lot of other people do, just go south of the border or north of the border, by the way. Canada's the same way. I knew a guy who had a heart condition, and he said, I can't afford my heart medicine because I lost my job. And I said, well, try going to Canada. He talked to his doctor. Doctor says that's a good idea. He got his drugs via mail order from Canada, and they were a ton cheaper. He could afford them. Same drug.
Yes, that's true. But like I said, that guy from Portland, he could have went to Canada too. But I think the reason is Canada is closed yet because they won't let the Canadians into the United States to come down there. And this dentist that I went to, 80% of her clientele is from Canada.
Yeah.
And so they're hurting, because and everything closed. You have to be supposed to be out of there by 2:00 in the afternoon. Well, one of the times, one day we stayed over because that was the first time we went there. We had to work. We did it over a week's time. And so we just thought, well, we'll stay in Mexico for the night, and got us a motel. But we didn't realize that when they say they close up at 2:00, that means everything. There was no restaurants, there were no nothing, except we got propositioned.
Oh my. Well, you don't need to tell us if you took advantage of it or not, unless you want to. Well, hey,
no food, but that was it.
Okay, very good. Well, then just a quick thumbs up or thumbs down. If you were an American or a Western person considering going to a border town in Mexico for pharmaceuticals or dental work or eyeglasses or any type of eye doctoring, would you recommend it?
Yeah, I think so, because like I said, for that cap, for a crown rather, not cap, a crown, and that implant in the tooth, it cost me $2,400. And like I said, starting just for the implant was $5,500, and the crown is $2,000 and something, I think. So yeah, but that was too far to drive. But it was only because my brother lived out there in Arizona that I did it.
Got it.
But if you're closer somewhere, like a lot of people go from Texas down here to Texas, or from Missouri to Texas, then it would be a good deal too.
Well, very good. I just wanted to touch on that because, again, you're a remarkable man, and most people wouldn't have the guts to do something like that. And even you're not a spring chicken anymore, but you still are the adventurer, Jerome. So congratulations to you. I did want to talk about today in detail, though, the Headhunters of Borneo, and just a brief description. After you were in the military, you took your money and you traveled the world for how long?
Well, when I got out, I first lived in Chicago, and then I went to Hawaii and worked in Hawaii and saved my money. Went to Tahiti, Raiatea, and Bora Bora, back to Hawaii, and then it went to San Francisco. landed there in 67 while the hippie thing was going, just
Mm-hmm.
getting good, going good, and fell into that, which was wonderful. And then in 68, I decided to backpack and hitchhike Europe for 6 months, and ended up 5 years in a trip around the world.
And no matter where you were, you lived like a native, so it didn't cost you that much.
No, well, a lot of the times I spent about $1.50 a week, except when I was in the, in Scandinavia, it was more.
Sure.
In the Far East, Japan, it was a little more, but a lot of the places I could survive really inexpensive.
Yeah, amazing. And so traveling from west to east, how did you get to Borneo, and how did you stumble upon the Headhunters of Borneo?
Well, after, I don't know, it was about my third or fourth time into Singapore, I pulled out my trusty map. I had a map I bought in Germany or Europe somewhere. It was a German map. And I goes, oh, there's Borneo. And if I remember, I think I'd seen a National Geographic somewhere about the Headhunters of Borneo. But I says, well, we'll just go check out Borneo. But I wasn't thinking about the headhunters there, at that time. I just wanted to go see what Borneo was about. So we landed in Kuching. It took a freighter from Singapore to Kuching. And walking around the city, we went to the museum and there was hardly no Westerners there at this time. This was in 1971. And this Westerner, he seen us and come up to us and asked us what we were doing there. And he was a CUSO volunteer, which is a Canadian University Service overseas, CUSO.
Okay, so he was a Western man.
Yes, and he wanted to know what we was doing there, and we told him, well, I'd heard about Borneo, and we just wanted to see he says, well, I tell you what, he says, I live with the headhunters back on the Rajang River. He says, you just catch well, after we introduced ourselves and everything, he says, you catch a freighter to Cebu, and then get you a longboat and head down the Rajang River until you get to Balaga, which is they called it the Leaning Bazaar Balaga because all the buildings were leaning like to the left. And he says, then you catch another boat after that and go down still keep heading up the Rajang River and until you come to this here curve in the river, and it'll have a nice sandy beach, and there's a longhouse there. He says, that's where I'm living, and I'm doing a dictionary for their language. And so, oh, well, okay. That's all we had to go on pretty well, no map, no nothing, So after we said our goodbyes and everything and took care of business, we headed out. We got us a freighter out of Kuching to Cebu, and it don't go all the way into Cebu, but they have an express ferry, which it was shocking that it was that nice of a ferry boat.
Okay, hang tight for just a minute, because I'm looking at a map while you're describing this, and it would probably help if the listeners would look at a map of this. So if you go to the country of Borneo, into the northwest corner of the country, you see the city of Cebu, spelled Sibu. And then
yes.
that's right on the
Rajang River.
The Rajang River. And so that's where you want to be looking, correct?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Okay, just people can pause the podcast, they can come back to it once they get the map, because that will be very helpful to them. Now at that time, I mean, I'm looking at a map now, and Cebu seems to be a fairly large city. Was it then?
I'm sure it's a lot bigger now than it was then, but it was a city, a small city, town.
Okay. So you were in Cebu, and then you took the Rajang River east.
So after Cebu, then we had to wait for a longboat that was going up the Rajang. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember, I never made notes, and I should have. I don't remember how many days we had to sit there and wait until we got a longboat going up the river. And the longboat we got was a bigger one than a lot of the others at
Now,
the time.
what is a longboat?